Gratitude, Pathway to Permanent Change. I'm Mike Zigarelli. It's a timeless question. How do I become more like Jesus Christ? What can I do to develop authentic Christian character, to be patient and kind, to have joy and inner peace, to be gentle, compassionate, self-controlled, and forgiving? What can I do to truly care about people and to love them as God does? How can I finally and permanently become a better person than I am today? There are a lot of answers to these questions. Good answers, helpful answers, theologically sound and exegetically elegant answers. Answers that can forever alter the trajectory of your relationship with God and people. This broadcast attempts to offer some further insight into this consummate discipleship question from an empirical angle. I studied the beliefs, behaviors, and character qualities of 5,000 Christians worldwide, using a methodology applied regularly in the social sciences. Compare the gold medalists to the silver medalists, and see what really distinguishes the champions. In other words, for this study, I compared a group of what we might call, for lack of a better term, high-virtue Christians, that is, people who consistently display fruit of the Spirit virtues, to a group of average virtue Christians, to see what makes the more faithful believers different. What I found surprised me. Of all the possible explanations for why some Christians look more like Jesus than others, one explanation, one characteristic, clearly stood out above the rest, and that is gratitude. In Christian circles, when we discuss the question of how to grow in godliness, gratitude is seldom identified as one of the usual suspects. Rather, we're quick to cite Bible study, prayer, worship, fasting, and a host of other spiritual disciplines. And this is why the finding surprised me. In this research, the largest study of the subject to date, at least of which I'm aware, a mindset of gratitude dwarfed the practices of any or all such disciplines as an explanation for how Christians go from average in virtue to consistently high in virtue. That is, as an explanation for why some of us consistently display fruit of the Spirit virtues and others do not. Before I get to that evidence, let me explain why this happens. Centuries ago, the philosopher Cicero argued that among virtues, gratitude is the parent of all the others. That is, it's a virtue that begets other virtues. There seems to be a lot of truth to that claim. Growing one's gratitude appears to have a radical and transformational effect on character because it's one of God's primary vehicles for inducing or parenting other Christian qualities. Stated from a Christian worldview, gratitude is a vehicle that makes us better, more Christ-like people. Call it a parent virtue, call it the gratitude effect, call it miraculous, call it whatever you'd like. Regardless of the label, gratitude is a powerful disposition that provides us with a very efficient, very effective mechanism for developing myriad character traits. Want more inner peace? Well, work on gratitude. Want more patience? Work on gratitude. Want to be more compassionate? Well, you get the idea. Gratitude does all this by setting a new thought context for processing our circumstances in life. The context of an abundant life. A context where everything we have is a gift. A context where we see clearly all that we really do have in life, and where we recognize that things could always be worse. Within this context, our view of the entire world is different, and we're suddenly empowered to be the people God calls us to be, to more deeply love God, to love neighbor, and to love our own lives. To be authentic salt and light at home, at work, at church, and everywhere else. This theory of gratitude as a parent virtue derives not only from ancient philosophers like Cicero, but, not surprisingly, from theologians as well. Exegetes of the Hebrew Scriptures, of the New Testament, and even the Quran have all cited gratitude as central among virtues. What may surprise some people, though, is that contemporary social scientists have also advanced and empirically tested this theory, concluding that gratitude stimulates moral behavior and encourages people to behave in what they call a pro-social manner. Stated more concretely, They've shown that gratitude is positively related to such outcomes as life satisfaction, vitality, happiness, optimism, hope, empathy, and the willingness to provide emotional and tangible support for other people, while being negatively related to anxiety, depression, and one's overall disposition. Collectively, such studies present credible evidence that feeling grateful generates a ripple effect through every area of our lives, potentially satisfying some of our deepest yearnings, our desire for happiness, our pursuit of better relationships, and our incessant quest for inner peace and contentment. Given all this, it should be clear that what I report in this broadcast regarding the effects of gratitude is not new information. Quite the contrary, it's old and very public news. It's news that's been around for millennia, but that's a testimony to its merits. The advice to cultivate character through growing gratitude is time-honored wisdom that transcends generations, cultures, and religious traditions. Much of the reasoning here may ring true to you. We've all experienced moments in life when we suddenly become cognizant of the enormity of blessing in our life. A narrowly averted collision with a tractor-trailer, a momentarily lost child at the store, a news segment about some illness that's plaguing a third-world country, a phone call at 3 a.m. that, contrary to our fears, is not tragic news, but only a wrong number, an eye-opening missions trip to a destitute area, a clarifying moment watching our children sleep. A wave of thankfulness quickly follows such events and lasts for as long as we remain mindful of the blessing. During that time, we experience significant manifestations of other Christian virtues. We become more Christ-like in our disposition toward everyone and everything. But, and most of us have experienced this as well, the empowerment vanishes as suddenly as it appeared, and we're back to being the people that we were before. The transformation, while welcome and wonderful, was fleeting. That's the nature of gratitude. It's a generator of other virtues, but only so long as it exists. I found that one of the major secrets to success for these high-virtue Christians, those who are most consistently Christ-like, is that they've mastered the art of maintaining a grateful disposition. Gratitude is simply part of who they are, rather than being some sporadic, refreshing occurrence. How do they do it? How do they nurture and sustain a grateful spirit? Well, in a sentence, they think differently from the way many of the rest of us think. The mind of a high-virtue Christian, it seems, is a disciplined mind, a pure and godly mind, a mind that is adept at immediately clearing away sinful thoughts. It's a mind that is focused on what one has rather than what one does not have. A mind that refuses to think in terms of what's missing from life, in terms of how much better life could be, if only. Instead, the high-virtue Christian in my study, they want what they have. They're fully content with what's been conferred upon them, and they frequently thank God for their blessings. If you want to dig more deeply into the evidence for this, I invite you to read the unabridged text version of this broadcast at the website here. Or, for even more information, you can read the book on which all this is based, entitled Cultivating Christian Character. It's published by ACSI, the Association of Christian Schools International. But the bottom line on the research is that the most fertile ground for growing gratitude is a thought life that purges sinful thoughts before they fester, that eradicates envy, and that replaces these thoughts with reminders of how richly blessed one really is. The Apostle Paul apparently had the same answer, but stated it more succinctly and more powerfully. He said, "Take captive every thought, and make it obedient to Christ." Indeed, perpetual gratitude begins with a renewed mind. Part 2 of this broadcast gets really practical with this. Just how does a person grow his or her gratitude? What specifically can we do to develop and maintain this thankful disposition so that we can finally make permanent progress in our character?